Welcome to the July 2024 edition of Upfront REAL, brought to you by Ohio Cooperative Living Magazine. I'm Karen Whitney, Director of Communications for OEC, and with me, Pat O'Loughlin, our President and CEO. We're here in July. We always think about our country's independence, July 4th, 1776, and you think about over the 250 years almost, how much innovation we've had. The invention of electricity was part of that. And today and this time, something invented so long ago, we still depend on it so much, and that dependence is growing. Talk about how much demand there is today for electricity.
Yeah, so, electricity's been widely available in the country for about 100 years for most people. Electric cooperatives started almost 90 years ago now to start to spread the benefits of electricity into rural America. And through that time, we've seen periods of dramatic growth, especially as it was just taking off. It was a new technology back in the day. But for the last 20 years or so, the growth has been much slower, mostly because energy conservation has really helped with more efficient appliances and other things that have helped reduce our need for more electricity. But today we're at another one of these periods where we're expecting really rapid growth from industrialization, from electric vehicles, and now from data centers or AI. All those things are resulting in all of a sudden a new and dramatic growth for electricity, and something that, as you said, we depend on more than ever in our day-to-day lives too, just for our health, well-being, security, you name it. We depend on electricity every day.
What does that demand curve look like, or percentage? Like, how much demand are we seeing increase at what pace?
Yeah, so it's locational, I would say that, but here in central Ohio, they are predicting, they being the grid operators, the people that own the transmission network, that our demand for electricity just in central Ohio is likely to double between now and 2030. Wow. Now that's something we haven't really seen before, and it's because of these very large load additions for industrial loads, for data centers, and then also just the expanding electrification of everything we do in our day-to-day lives. So this is pretty dramatic, and it's going to require a lot of investment in infrastructure to make it happen.
So a lot of demand means a lot of supply is needed to meet that demand. Where do you see the supply growth coming from?
Yeah, so that is really the tough question right now, because we're actually seeing a decline in supply. We've talked about that over the last few months as some of the older, particularly coal plants, have been closing around the country, and particularly in this region. And there's been less additions of new natural gas plants in the last couple of years. We've seen continued steady growth in renewables, and we will continue to see that, but that's not going to fill this large gap that we see. So I think what we're going to end up with is kind of what we've always had to supply it, which is a mix of everything. We're going to see natural gas development, I believe, even though right now the EPA rules prohibit large gas plants from being built. I think reality will take over, and we're going to have to do that. We're going to continue to see growth in renewables. We're likely to see some growth in nuclear, but that's 10 to 20 years off. We've talked about that before too. That's not going to be here by 2030 in any way. So we're going to probably have to keep around some of the older supply that maybe people thought were going to retire, just to keep things going.
And to meet that demand.
And we might even be rationing the growth. We may not be able to grow as fast as people would like to, which would be unusual.
Explain what you mean by that, by rationing the growth. What do you mean by that?
Well, so it would mean that if you have a new business or that you want to connect to the grid, you may have to wait till the grid's ready for it, which is something we've used to saying, well, maybe we'll wait months or even a year for the local infrastructure to get built. But now we're talking about infrastructure all the way back down, even including power generation, and that doesn't happen in a year or so. That could be 5 or 7 years till new large connections might be available. Okay. That's not something we've really ever had to deal with before.
So we see, we invest and we have renewables, solar and wind. We see more solar fields. Sometimes you see signs of people saying no solar. Yeah. Is solar, wind, is that the solution here to help with this gap, or are we looking at something else?
Well, it'll be a part of the solution, I'm sure, but anytime you've got large-scale infrastructure development like is going to be needed, you've got property rights, you've got land use considerations, you've got environmental impacts and then you've got cost. And all of those things have people that are for, people that are against, and it's, we've got a process to sort those out, but it takes time. And so that's really the challenge right now. We're seeing growth so fast, and the long lead time for major infrastructure developments, those things are out of sync right now. And as I said, that may end up putting a throttle on some of the growth that we're expecting right now.
Yeah, and you mentioned nuclear taking so long. We know that the solar and wind are not there 24/7. They're not this base load power like gas and natural gas and coal. Geothermal, that's something we hear about here and there. Is there something else on the horizon that you've maybe seen a presentation of that seems promising?
Yeah, so there's not a lot in the near term. Geothermal is an idea that, is again another one of these maybe someday type things. It's still barely at the research level to be a significant contributor in this part of the country. Yeah, that is one of the problems, is we don't have anything where we can just snap our fingers and say, oh yeah, well, let's do that. I mean, people talk about electric fusion as another thing, but that again is going to be decades away from commercial development. So I think the reality is that we are stuck with the technologies that we have in the near term over the next 5 to 10 years, and we can look for innovation to maybe develop some additional resources over the next couple of decades, but it's not going to be the next couple of years.
That's nothing overnight. There are other countries maybe not as developed as we are. I mean, certainly have run into these kinds of challenges. You've heard of, power rationing, things like that in other places in the world. Do you foresee something like that happening? We always think it can never happen here. But.
Yeah, we think that can never happen here, but and I don't think it will to the extent that maybe you've seen in some other parts of the world. But what we are going to see is maybe a slower growth than what we expected, maybe a slower adoption of electric vehicles than people at one point thought. Yeah, I think what we're more likely to see is a slowdown in our ambitions and the things that we'd like to do.
Okay, very good. Very interesting topic, and happy 4th of July to you, of course. Happy 4th of July to all of you. Enjoy that hot summer that we have out there, and we appreciate you watching.
Thanks, Karen.